Hello and welcome to this edition of FiTV. I'm your host, Brad Swanson. We are coming to you from what is the Florida Capitol, but we're in the second to last day, allegedly, before the end of the 2019 legislative session. I am joined by Alex Glorioso, healthcare reporter and insurance reporter for the great Politico, Florida. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
All right, well, we're so glad to have you on. Okay, so you literally have covered one of the biggest food fights of the session, and that was the certificate of need. I know we're going to get into some other stuff, but how did that all break down? What did you see happen there?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest kind of food fight part of it really happened at the end of session because the Senate knew that the House Speaker had a list of healthcare priorities that they needed to pass this year, and repealing the laws that govern where hospitals can be built in the state and what services they can provide, also known as the Certificate of Need laws, was one of those things that he definitely wanted passed. So they did all of his work all session, and it got delayed a couple times, and they came up with a licensure transition program that all the senators kind of signed off onto, and it had special protections for cancer centers and other kind of specialty hospitals. And at the end of the session, the speaker was like, no, I want a full repeal of all hospitals. I don't want this other thing you came up with.
Right.
And so, he got what he wanted at the end of the day. And the only thing that they managed to really rescue from all of that was, they got a delay for the cancer centers and the specialty hospitals for another 2 years.
Right.
So, but they just delayed it. I mean, he's really going to get a full repeal, and I think that some senators, especially Senator Bean and Senator Bradley, who have quite a bit of power, Bean is the healthcare appropriations chair, and Bradley is the budget chair. I think they were a little floored at how they got rolled on the issue because it all came out in the final appropriations committee,
right.
And this massive strike all was put onto it by the sponsor, Senator Harrell, and they just had to accept it, and it was kind of amazing to watch, actually.
Yeah. So you've got powerful senators who normally are going to have their piece, their influence, which I'm sure they did, but ultimately the brokering of the grander session, you never know what this was a part of other conversations with other legislation that could be completely unrelated. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm not quite as cynical as some. I do think that the committees have a role to play in crafting legislation. I think that sometimes you can, I guess, deviate, take a right turn after the legislation's been crafted, and maybe some senators would argue that's what happened in this bill, but, I do think it still has a role to play.
Sure,
I just think that, it's only half of the equation.
Yeah.
The other half of the equation is what does leadership want?
Right.
I mean, and that's an accepted part of the process.
Right.
And, it's just interesting.
Well, so that was a major issue. Now we only have a little bit of time here. What was another healthcare issue that you followed that you really had fun covering or thought was interesting?
Yeah, so I mean, I think what was, the most interesting thing about covering healthcare this session was that, like I said, it was generally accepted that a lot would happen in healthcare. I had one lobbyist note to me, in background at the end of session, what is the Senate President really getting out of all of this? We know that the Speaker's going to get ambulatory surgical centers to have patients stay overnight, which is something that the House has been wanting for 7 years.
Right.
We know that Certificate of Need is essentially going to get repealed, which is another thing the House has wanted for 7 years.
Right.
We know that they're going to expand direct primary care agreements, which essentially allow patients to
contract with the doctor. Right?
Yeah, to see doctors. And a bill that passed this year was it used to just be primary care doctors, and now it's any kind of doctor.
It's amazing.
And so this circumvents insurance as a vehicle. It just downplays the role insurance plays in healthcare, which is a long sought priority for the House. And so it's those we knew definitely were going to pass, and
Right.
so much more even passed on top of that. So
It's
it
amazing.
was really just like a total win for the speaker.
Sounds like a win if you're a healthcare reporter too. There was no shortage of content to write about.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was a really fun session in terms of policy because
Right.
you write all this stuff every year and then nothing passes.
Right,
and this
right.
year you're like,
All
I don't
passed.
know, yeah.
Maybe it's your coverage that made it pass.
I don't think so, but it is interesting to cover.
Well, Alex, thank you so much for coming
Yeah,
on
thanks for having
FiTV.
me.
We encourage our viewers to follow you and follow your coverage of healthcare and insurance issues. And we look forward to having you on FiTV again soon.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming
Happy
on.
to do it.
That's all the time we have for today's episode. Hit us up on our social media on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And for now, thanks for tuning in.